As every new day breaks forth, God's mercy is always at work, ensuring that His beloved children are not left in darkness. The testimony you are about to watch is one you will truly thank God for encountering today. It comes from a mother who lost her daughter during childbirth, but what she experienced in her near-death encounter is both shocking and deeply moving. It is a revelation about the rapture. Her story is not only touching but also filled with lessons that will stir your heart. She speaks with so much detail and sincerity, and we can assure you that it is worth listening to from beginning to end. Kindly tell us where you are watching from in the comments. We love you, and we welcome you to this family of faith, where we grow together in hope, prayer, and love for one another. My name is Hannah Miller. I am 37 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio, United States. From the outside, people would say I had a normal life, married, expecting my first child, and working a steady job. But behind closed doors, my life with my husband was filled with struggles that I often hid from others. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought it would change everything for us. I hoped my husband would soften, maybe even become the loving husband I once dreamed of. But as the months passed, I realized the pregnancy only made the cracks in our marriage wider. He never showed excitement, never asked how I was feeling, and rarely offered any support. Still, whenever friends asked how we were doing, I smiled and gave excuses for him, saying he was just busy or stressed from work. I worked as a secretary in a small law office downtown. Most of my paycheck went toward prenatal appointments and saving up for the baby. Daniel earned more than me, but he gave so little. On days when my feet were swollen and my back ached, I longed for him to show concern, but instead, he criticized me for being too needy. I swallowed my pain, telling myself that once the baby arrived, everything would change. The doctor at Riverside Methodist Hospital told me during one of my visits that my due date was close and labor could begin any time that week. I came home hopeful, thinking maybe my husband would understand the seriousness of the moment. That evening, I told him gently that the doctor had said the baby could come at any time and that I really needed him by my side this week. Instead of reassurance, he snapped that I always exaggerated things. He turned away from me. Later that night, I sat on the couch with my hands resting on my belly, feeling the baby's strong kicks. I whispered prayers, asking God for strength and telling my child that everything would be okay. I wanted to believe it. But deep inside, loneliness pressed on my chest like a heavy weight. I chose to forgive my husband again, as I always did, and convinced myself that tomorrow might be better. Still, I could not shake the quiet fear that something was not right. It was late on a Wednesday night. I was alone in the living room, folding tiny baby clothes that I had washed earlier. At first, I thought it was just another false alarm, the kind of cramps I had felt on and off for the past week. But then another contraction followed, stronger than the first, and I knew deep inside that this was different. My heart raced. Labor had started. I grabbed my phone and dialed my husband's number. He was supposed to be only a few minutes away, hanging out at a friend's house. I told him that the pains had started and begged him to come quickly. His voice sounded annoyed, as if I had disturbed him. He said he would be on his way but hung up without another word. The minutes dragged like hours. I paced the floor, breathing the way the nurses had taught me in my prenatal classes, trying to stay calm. But the fear of being alone grew heavier with each passing minute. I kept staring at the door, waiting for Daniel to walk in, but he didn't. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard the front door open. Daniel walked in, not in a rush, not even carrying the urgency I had hoped for. His face looked irritated, as though I had dragged him into something he didn't want to deal with. I clutched my stomach and told him we needed to go to the hospital immediately, but instead of helping me to the car, he muttered about how I was always making things dramatic. By the time we finally got into the car, the contractions were coming fast and strong. I gripped the seatbelt. I prayed silently that we would reach the hospital in time. The streets of Columbus blurred through my tears as I whispered God's name again and again. When we pulled up to Riverside Methodist, I could hardly walk. Nurses rushed me into the maternity ward, but I knew the delay had already made things worse. My body felt weak, my breath shallow, and deep inside I feared something terrible was unfolding. As they wheeled me into the labor room, I tried to stay awake, but darkness was already tugging at me, stronger than the pain. The last thing I remember in that labor room was the nurses shouting and the doctor urging me to push. My whole body shook as I tried, but my strength was gone. A heavy silence wrapped around me, and then everything faded. It felt like slipping underwater where no sound could reach me. Suddenly, I saw myself. My body was lying on the hospital bed, pale and motionless. The doctors and nurses worked frantically around me, pressing on my stomach, checking my pulse, calling my name. I wanted to answer them, but my voice could not break through. I was standing there, watching, yet not inside my body. The bright lights of the labor room glared, and machines beeped urgently. I saw my standing at the corner, restless and uneasy, his face pale. For a brief moment, I thought he would finally realize what I had been through, but I couldn't feel any connection to him anymore. It was as if the bond between us had been cut. Then something strange happened. The sound of the room grew distant, like it was fading into the background. I felt myself being pulled upward, slowly at first, then faster. I looked down and saw the hospital shrinking beneath me. The earth below me seemed to dissolve into mist as I rose higher, carried by a force I could not resist. I expected to enter a place of blinding light, but instead, I came to what looked like an opening in the sky, an entrance, like a vast portal. It shines with a glow I cannot describe. Without walking or moving, I drifted straight into it. When I stepped inside, I was shocked. It wasn't the heaven I imagined. It looked like Earth. Streets, buildings, cars, and people moving about as though life was continuing normally. I blinked, wondering if I had fallen into a dream. But something in my spirit told me this was no dream. As I walked, I noticed a strange awareness in the environment. It seemed like everyone already knew about something called the Rapture. People in the streets, in shops, in parks, were speaking of it as though it was a common fact of life. It wasn't a hidden topic, it was the center of every conversation. Some spoke of it jokingly, laughing as if it was nothing more than a rumor. Others, with serious faces, spoke with trembling voices, hoping they would be ready when it happened. I stood in the middle of it all, confused, wondering why this place looked like Earth but felt completely different. As I walked further into that strange version of Earth, my steps led me toward a building that looked like a church. From the outside, it seemed like any normal church I had seen back in Ohio, with a cross on the front and people gathered inside. My heart lifted for a moment because I thought surely here I would find truth and peace. But the moment I entered, my spirit grew heavy. The sanctuary was full, the choir singing, people raising their hands, yet something felt off. As I looked closer, I realized why. The activities going on were not truly centered on God. It was more like a show, a performance meant to entertain rather than to bring people into holiness. I could sense that the presence of God was not there, even though people thought it was. I noticed pastors at the pulpit speaking with confidence, but their words were empty. They kept telling the congregation that everything was fine, that God's grace was wide enough to cover all sins, whether they repented or not. They told the people that once they were saved, nothing they did after could ever put them in danger of hell. I could feel the weight of the lie, but the members seemed to accept it gladly because it allowed them to live carelessly. I wanted to shout at them, to tell them that their pastors were misleading them, that true salvation requires walking daily with Jesus, not using grace as a license to sin. My voice tried to rise, but no one could hear me. I stood there helpless, watching as people clapped and cheered while being led further away from the truth. What shocked me most was that the people themselves were not ignorant. They knew about the rapture. They even discussed it among themselves. Yet they treated it like a faraway story, something to think about later. They lived as if the trumpet would not sound anytime soon. Some laughed, some whispered doubts, and some even mocked the idea, though they were sitting inside the church. Leaving the church, I walked through the streets of that strange world, still shaken by what I had seen. I expected to find comfort somewhere else, but instead I was led into even more confusion. As I moved from place to place, I noticed something I never thought I would see. People of other religions, people who were not Christians at all, were also preparing for the rapture. I passed by a mosque, and I saw men and women gathered, speaking in hushed tones. They were not talking about their normal prayers or rituals. They were discussing the coming rapture, saying it could happen at any moment. I stood frozen, trying to understand. How could they be aware of something that I had always believed was only revealed to Christians? Farther down, I passed a group of people from another faith, holding their sacred texts. Yet their conversation was the same. They were speaking of the trumpet sound, of people being taken, of a day when the earth would change forever. Their faces showed both fear and eagerness, as if they too hoped to be taken when the time came. It left me completely unsettled. I had always thought the rapture would be something only Christians looked forward to, something only the church would be watching for. But here I was, in this place, seeing people of every religion preparing and waiting. As I observed them, it became clear that the topic of the rapture was not hidden anymore. It had become the main announcement of the day, the subject on everyone's lips. People in markets, offices, schools, and homes were all speaking about it. Some treated it lightly, as if it were just another event. Others were deeply serious, trembling and praying that they would be taken when the time arrived. I kept asking myself why. Why was everyone, Christian and non-Christian alike, anticipating the same thing? It made me realize the scale of what was coming. The rapture was not going to be a secret, quiet event. The whole world seemed to know it was approaching, yet many were still living in ways that would leave them behind. As I walked further into that place, still trying to understand why the whole world was talking about the rapture, my eyes were opened to something even more disturbing. I began to notice that many people had something on their hands, something I had not seen before. At first it looked invisible, but then with a deeper look, I could see it clearly. It was a kind of special mark, faint yet glowing, like it existed in a realm beyond normal sight. What shocked me was how normal the people with the mark appeared. They went about their daily lives like everyone else. Some were smiling, some were busy, some were praying quietly. But the mark on their hands set them apart. It was as if the mark was the true sign of belonging, the real evidence of who would be taken when the time came. I quickly looked down at my own hands. My heart sank. There was nothing there. No faint glow, no invisible sign, nothing to show that I was sealed. A wave of panic washed over me. Why didn't I have the mark? I thought of all my years in church, all my prayers, all the times I believed I was walking with God. Yet here I was, empty-handed. As I continued to observe, I realized something even more terrifying. The mark could not be faked. It wasn't something a pastor could give, and it wasn't something a person could draw on themselves. It came only from God, and it could not be hidden. Those who had it carried it openly before heaven, whether they realized it or not. I began to tremble. My thoughts raced back over my life. Was it possible that my hidden anger, my unforgiving spirit, the bitterness I carried toward Daniel and others, had closed my heart off from God? Was it possible that while I was busy excusing my wounds, I had slowly drifted from the very source of life? The fear grew heavier. I wanted to cry out, to beg for another chance, but the weight of reality pressed down on me. This mark was the only thing that mattered now. Without it, nothing else counted, neither church attendance, nor singing, nor hearing sermons. Only those sealed with the mark would rise when the trumpet sounded. I felt like collapsing under the truth of it. And even before I could process what it all meant, I began to hear a sound in the distance, faint at first, but growing louder, like a mighty trumpet being blown across the sky. The sound grew stronger and stronger, like waves rolling through the heavens. It wasn't a normal trumpet that a person could blow. It was vast, powerful, shaking the very ground beneath me. Every person in that place heard it. Conversations stopped. Movements froze. The whole world seemed to pause as the trumpet echoed across the sky. My heart pounded in my chest. This was the moment. The rapture was happening. I looked around in fear and wonder, waiting to see what would unfold. Then it began. Those with the mark on their hands suddenly lit up, as if a hidden light burst forth from inside them. Without effort, without struggle, they began to rise. Their feet lifted off the ground, their bodies drawn upward as though heaven itself was pulling them home. Some cried tears of joy as they ascended. Others stretched out their arms in worship, faces glowing with peace. I watched in awe, but also in terror. Because when I looked at my own hands again, there was nothing. No mark, no light, no upward pull. My body remained on the ground, heavy and still. I tried to jump, to run, to somehow join them, but nothing happened. It wasn't about willpower or desire. It was only about the mark. I wanted to join them, I wanted to rise with them, but my feet were heavy as stone. I looked down at myself and saw no mark, only emptiness. My heart broke, knowing I had missed the very thing I longed for. When the vision ended, I found myself trembling. I knew this was not given to me so I could remain silent. It was a warning, not just for me, but for every believer, every family, every soul that still has breath. The rapture is not a story to entertain us. It is not a date to debate or a topic to argue about. It is real, and it will come suddenly, without announcement, without delay when the appointed hour arrives. Many will not be ready, and the pain of being left behind will be greater than any suffering this world has ever seen. If you are hearing these words, I plead with you, do not play with your walk with God. Do not let sin keep you bound. Do not allow the distractions of this world to steal your heart. Be watchful. Be prayerful. Be faithful. The trumpet will sound, and when it does, only those who are marked by His Spirit will rise. I saw the joy of the raptured ones, and I saw the sorrow of the left behind. I lived the anguish of regret, and I tell you now, it is not a road you want to take. Jesus is merciful, but His word is true. The day of grace is closing quickly. Hold tightly to your Bible. Pray every day. Love one another with sincerity. Forgive quickly, because bitterness will weigh you down. And above all, keep your heart pure before God. The time is short, and the hour is closer than we think. This is my testimony, my vision, my warning. Take it seriously. The rapture is coming. Be ready, so that when the trumpet sounds, you will be among those who rise to meet the Lord in the sky.